We begin in the name of God. Greetings. Welcome to another session of From the Desk of Ghamidi. The series of discussions in the 23 question series continues with Ghamidi Sahab. Today, we begin the 59th episode of the series. Today's discussion will focus on the very important topics of singing and music. We are holding the second session on this subject today. Thank you very much, Ghamidi Sahab, for your time. Let's begin. In a short while, I will present the verses and instances in the Qur'an based on which scholars argue that music is forbidden, as laid down by the Qur'an itself, and that the companions, based on these verses, consider it forbidden. Before that, I would like to know about the last session, where you spoke for about an hour and provided some insightful examples. These examples truly impacted people and made them reflect. Indeed, these examples were quite useful and helped in their understanding. I would appreciate if you could continue from where we left off and explain what you intended to communicate and what the examples you provided signify.
I had made 3 points. My first point was that the issue of prohibition is not something that can be left to my inferences or conclusions. When God declares something prohibited, He does so explicitly, stating that He has made it unlawful. Thus, I provided examples to you when the objective was to explain that a particular type of relationship is not permissible in marriage. A comprehensive list was provided. When the objective was to explain which foods are forbidden, those were also explicitly named and stated. This is one approach. The second is that God has established guidelines for moral prohibitions, just as He has established guidelines for consumables. The criteria given for food is that all pure foods are allowed and all impure ones are forbidden. Moreover, it has been specified there are 2 reasons for prohibition. First, if there is rice or filth somewhere, you avoid it because it is objectionable or repugnant. It is something that includes an element best described as filth. What is the second reason? The second is when a person adopts a method to attain something that God has forbidden, such as engaging in shirk, such as defying God by committing theft. All these issues have been outlined by the Quran as principles regarding moral prohibitions. The principles were outlined that these are the 5 factors that guide people away from prohibited actions. So this is actually the method of the Quran. So the first point I made about singing and music is that nowhere in the Quran are they specifically named or mentioned. You see, Gina is a commonly used term in Arabic. Similarly, when discussing musical instruments, the term ma'azif is used. That is, by using these names, as the Quran usually does with prohibitions, nowhere is their forbidden nature explicitly stated. The second point I made was that this is not found in the hadith either. That is, if you examine the entire body of hadith, nothing to this effect is mentioned there. So this is the first issue. The second is when the Quran establishes principles, that is, the principles concerning consumables were established, that pure foods are permissible and impure ones are forbidden. So it can be clearly stated that in such cases, this impurity and this filth are present, and along with it, this fisk or transgression too can be stated. That is, the standard set by the Quran regarding prohibitions as it pertains to consumables. The same applies in cases of moral prohibitions. Clearly, singing and music do not pertain to consumables. They would fall under moral prohibitions, and we know that rules have been outlined regarding moral prohibitions, and I presented each of these rules to illustrate that we should view them in that context too. That is, a clear question can be posed. Is music immoral? Does it infringe upon someone's rights? Is it a type of act where there is an excess committed against life, property, or the honor of individuals? Is it shirk or polytheism or a bidah or innovation in religion? Showing his open defiance and steadfastness in his position, it was declared, "Go, and all those with you will be subject to hellfire, a just recompense." Following this is the verse, "Read and disturb whomever you can with your voice." Thus, the translation by Shah Sahab is "with your voice." Then, the foundation of prohibitions that has been established by the Quran, contrary to it, neither the Quran nor the Messenger of God would state anything. So that too does not apply. These are the 2 points. The third point I made was that beyond this, if anything could be said, is what I have stated before. I have presented my viewpoint, and that is all. Fine arts, in their essence, are completely permissible, whether it is poetry or it is story writing, whether it is music or whether it is singing, or whether it involves other forms like painting. Painters obviously exhibits their works of art. Among them, nothing is inherently prohibited. Rather, it is their application that sometimes becomes the basis for prohibition or disapproval. It is their application. Now, look what are the different ways they are used. We create images. Today, images have taken on a unique significance. They have become tools for education, communication, and a medium for news and information. Such platforms have emerged that we use them most effectively to convey religious teachings. All these aspects are present. However, the same image in a different era was used for promoting shirk. It's the usage. One aspect is the art of creating images, and the other is the application of images, the act of drawing. Say my portrait was created, or I created yours. Someone made one of their father, their mother, or a landscape. So there is photography. So I said that photography itself is a skill taught by God to humans. God has stated in the Qur'an that when you train your dogs, so they hunt on your behalf, this too is knowledge given by God through which you train them. Thus, all these skills are gifts from God. God imbued you with the ability to create images. God endowed you with the capability to express things to others beautifully through voice. Thus, these are blessings bestowed by God, none of which are inherently prohibited, though their application might be. So this was their application. And you see, as a result, the creation of images became a major source of shirk. Just consider how that happened. That is, polytheism fundamentally arises from imagination. That is, you assume that the creator of this universe has included certain beings alongside himself who govern the workings of this universe. Those beings were not visibly present. Concerning those beings, some philosophical ideas were developed. Now, to make them accessible to the masses, they were depicted through paintings. At that time, inappropriate use was made. A wrongful act was committed through pictures. A wrongful practice evolved into a systematic cultural norm. Or a thick call to action, all has not specified. فَكُلُّ صَوْتٍ دُعَاءً إِلَيْهِ عَمَلِهِ وَطَاعَتِهِ. Every voice that calls to it and to its ingredients, hence it encompasses all voices invite to him. Every voice in the world, what would occur therein? I am discussing the prominent status of Sakinama in Iqbal's poetry. I have seen children studying it because the language and style used in Allama Iqbal's poetry aren't easily accessible. However, a singer performed some of it about 10 to 15 years ago. Since then, its popularity has surged, and then I observed children at home reciting it. In earlier times, it was said that a ghazal, unless performed by female vocalists, wouldn't reach the marketplaces. So, what has happened here? Here, poetry was crafted. The poetry addressed pressing issues, enriched them with eloquent words, structured them with rhyme and rhythm, infusing them with a unique vibrancy which elevated the subject matter. Its performance enhanced its quality further, elevating the entire subject to its ultimate expression. Now we utilize both mediums to recite naat or praise of the Prophet and to recite hamd or praise of God. We hold large gatherings for naat. We recite the hamd of the glorious and benevolent God. Likewise, through poetry, our esteemed poets have invigorated the lives of the people. What are your thoughts on Hali's Musadas? What are your thoughts on Iqbal's poetry? So much good has been achieved through it. It isn't inherently forbidden. I provided an example that in one instance, the Quran criticized poets, and the rationale it provided for the criticism was unarguable. Yet, you don't deduce from that poetry itself was forbidden, or that this art form has been included in the category of prohibitions by God.
Here too, there is no mention of music.
The Quran itself mentions it. Following this, I explained that it is the use of an art form that matters. Certain things, when utilized, it's unimaginable that they could be used for improper purposes, yet that happens. Consider a scenario where I tell my child, not to enter the alley, and advise my wife not to let the child go into the alley. The alley or the street is a blessing. Without it, how will I leave my house? How will I reach the market? How will I get to my office? So, the alley itself is not bad, yet certain activities are associated with it, that is, loafers misuse it to loiter and create disturbances. Unsavory individuals frequent it, hence we caution our children to avoid it, or we instruct our wives not to allow them into the alley. This is the use of the street. Similarly, we apply the uses of poetry, photography, and the alley. Now observe. In singing, various forms are present, such as qawwali, a remarkable creation. Through it, we convey numerous truths. It generates unique delight for people. In this way, their souls experience a soothing impact. However, if its content includes inappropriate elements or the message it conveys is aimed at promoting evil, lowly, or deviant matters, then it has misused an immensely powerful medium. So what is the essence of this discussion? What the Qur'an states regarding prohibition, if there is an aspect of it, the Qur'an would explicitly state it. If not, then it has laid down basic principles for prohibition. Its application will be executed by the Prophet, or occasionally directly by the Qur'an, and even you and I can apply it. These foundational principles regarding prohibition have been articulated under both headings, regarding food and drink, as well as moral behavior. What about consumables? Pure things are permissible and impure ones are forbidden. And what about moral issues? Those 5 aspects, which I have repeatedly discussed, these are the foundations. Considering these, what things are forbidden and what things are permissible, and how should we assess the usage of various things based on these principles? So the fundamental point is, in this case, nothing is inherently forbidden. Neither singing nor musical instruments are inherently forbidden. What matters is how they are used. For this usage, I have provided an example with poetry. I had mentioned another example previously. In Surah Jumma, this issue was addressed from a different angle. I had alluded to it briefly as we were running out of time. I would like to delve a bit deeper now, and I will explain that if you think about how a particular thing can be misused, if it occurs at the wrong time, then we need to bring attention to it.
Even though it may be permissible?
Even though it might be completely permissible, that is, under normal circumstances, there might be nothing inherently wrong with it. Yet in the conclusion of Surah Jumma, many who read the Qur'an will also be familiar with this. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ وَإِذَا رَأَوْا تِجَارَةً أَوْ لَهْوًا انفضوا إِلَيْهَا وَتَرَكُوكَ قَائِمًا قُلْ مَا عِندَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهْوِ وَمِنَ التِّجَارَةِ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. This is toward the end of Surah Jum'ah. I shall read this translation from my exegesis, Al-Bayan. Believers, give due importance to the Prophet, and when the call for prayer is sounded on Friday on his behalf, rush earnestly to the prayer and leave off trading. Is trading inherently illegal? Our lives depend on it. Our economic systems rely on trading activities.
No doubt.
This is a reality. However, when the congregation for Friday prayer begins, God says to leave trading, meaning when God has decreed that this weekly prayer should be observed in such a manner that Muslims gather together for it. This congregation is organized by Muslims, and at the time these verses were revealed, the Prophet himself arranged for Jumma. He would deliver the Friday sermon. The last messenger of God would stand on the pulpit and lead the prayer. When the call to Jumma prayer is made, God instructs that at that moment, trading should cease. You must set aside all business activities and turn immediately to the remembrance of God. So, what happens here? Here, a more important issue has arisen, so he instructs us to not engage in that, and if someone does engage in it at that moment, we would say that they are indulging in a forbidden act. So, the prohibition is not on the act itself, but on the fact that at that particular moment, what was permissible was misused. This is also an example of the same. Now, look further. It appears that some companions made this mistake. Those who had embraced faith through the Prophet made this error. Leave your trading. This is better for you if only you knew. Then, when the prayer is concluded, disperse through the land and seek God's bounty, meaning this restriction applied only until the Jumma prayer. Once the call was made and the messenger of God stood to deliver the sermon, you were supposed to leave trading aside. This command was issued. Once the Jumma prayer concluded, you could go wherever you wanted to. It was stated, seek God's bounty and remember God often so that you may prosper. This describes the situation of these people. Here, God comments on their actions. But why was it necessary to state this? Jumma prayers had been established since the Prophet's arrival in Medina. So why was it necessary to mention this? This is how these people are, that when they see some trading or diversion, they rush towards it, leaving you standing.
Some among them
Tell them that which God has is far better than any diversion or trade, and God is the best of providers. So you see what happened here? The Prophet was standing for Jummah prayer. The call for Jummah had been made. The people had been called to prayer. And just at that moment, caravans arrived in the Medina market. People obviously needed to engage in trade. So, if they got there earlier, they might secure better deals. Similarly, when markets were set up, it often happens in our towns that entertainments are also arranged. So, the Quran uses two terms, indicating that at that moment, compared to Jummah and the Messenger of God, trade and entertainment became more appealing to some. Thus, they eagerly turned toward trade and entertainment, leaving the Prophet aside. Neither trading nor entertainment were prohibited activities. Both were treated in the same way. That is, it was not stated that one of these activities was forbidden and the companions gravitated towards it. Both activities were permissible in themselves, but at such a moment, the people inclined towards them when the Messenger of God was standing on the pulpit before leading the Jummah prayer.
A very important point.
It was then said that they should not have done this at such a time. The Quran severely admonished this behavior, and it is known that when this happened a few times afterward in Surah Jumma, the people were sternly warned in this manner. So here too, the same trading from which people were directed away, they again leaned towards it. This is what we refer to as trade. In the same way, if some entertainments were arranged in those days, they likely occurred during normal times too. In normal times, these would also be stimulating for people. However, when this coincided with the time of Jummah and people headed towards them, God stated that this was highly inappropriate and indecent behavior on their part. So, I presented these examples concerning use, just as the Quran refers to poets, from which perspective it criticizes poets for opposing the messenger, alleging that he merely recites poems. Such assertions are unfit for his exalted status. Following this, it depicts who typically follows the poets. What are their behaviors and characters like? What is the nature of their discussions? From this, you can infer the point I intended to make. You asked this question. Thus, I have explained to you in detail how we should view the category of prohibitions. That is, if a matter is explicitly clarified by God, then as Muslims, we must submit to it unquestioningly. If God has established certain foundations or principles, and they are being applied, for instance, directly stating that something is shirk, an obscenity, or an infringement of rights, then every Muslim must undoubtedly avoid it, and we have the right to declare it prohibited.
Indeed, Ghamidi Sahab.
We should avoid such things. However, if it concerns usage, then the usage of all things will be scrutinized. Consider, even if a book is used improperly, it would be criticized. Misusing a profession would also warrant criticism. If we are to rectify the usage, those same issues will come up again. What did you do? Did you misuse something in a way that it hindered prayer? It prevented fasting? It kept you from serving the Prophet? You were summoned to the Jummah prayer but couldn't make it? What happened? What aspect of the usage is considered that becomes an obstacle to fulfilling some obligation? Here, one final example of usage. after which I will respond to your queries. Loudspeakers are used among us. They were initially called ala-e-mukabir us-saut. A loudspeaker in itself wasn't deemed something forbidden. Initially, when it first appeared, it amplified sound. So it was used for singing and music. Thus, our scholars labeled it ala-e-lahu. So initially, as per their view, it was misused. So, when it was used for singing and music and deemed an instrument of ala-e-lahu, the moment people thought that we need to give call to prayer and make speeches, hence loudspeakers are quite useful. Why can't it be used in a mosque? Initially, when people saw that loudspeakers were brought into the mosque and used for call to prayers and speeches, you see, what was the verdict issued? It's an ala-e-lahu. It shouldn't enter the mosque. At that moment, it was just a matter of its use. That use could have been deemed right or wrong. And then, what did we see? We witnessed with our own eyes that the same ala-e-mukabbiru saut, the same ala-e-lahu, which is now present in every mosque, and sometimes restrictions are necessary so that its use should be conducted cautiously. And our scholars are not even ready to accept those restrictions. That is, an item that was once considered prohibited has now reached this status. Imagine the stages it has passed through. So, through some examples, I have explained to you that regarding singing and music, in the Qur'an or in the hadith, wherever a point has arisen, it concerns its usage. And usage, at times, even of the most permissible of things, can be done wrongly that both you and I would disapprove of and speak against.
The explanation is crystal clear. You provided several detailed examples. Those who reflect will find much to consider in these examples. A point that struck me is about the application of poetry, the work of the poets from that era, which the Quran discusses. And one practical instance occurred in Medina, where people, ignoring the Prophet's address, rushed towards the market, attracted to the merchandise. That too was discussed. Like you mentioned, usage can be permissible or impermissible. Similarly, it should apply to music. So why isn't it discussed in the Quran from any angle?
You should pose this question to those who issue fatwas declaring it unlawful. That is, if there was any usage of music, and certainly there was, those familiar with Arabic poetry or literature, aware of the Quraysh tribe's history and that of the Arabs, know well that in every community such gatherings were common. When the hadith is discussed, I will show you many such instances. You will see what types of gatherings used to occur then, and occasionally they led to disturbances as well. Their discussion will also come up. However, despite all this, there is no mention of it in the entire Quran. Nowhere does it explicitly state that singing is prohibited. From now on, do not approach it, or that it is rijsun min amali shaitan. These are the phrases used by the Quran for declared prohibitions. Regarding prohibitions, different expressions have been used. Even the Prophet, peace be upon him, has used various phrases when he wished to prohibit something. So, why hasn't it been discussed? We'll discuss this in detail. However, since we are discussing the Quran, I've elaborated my stance and presented my view that it is a blessing from God, whether it's singing or musical instruments, or poetry or photography, or any other art or craft. Yes, in the Quran itself, it states, Hum lillagwi mu'aridun. That is, true believers protect themselves from lahu. Here too it is mentioned. So, if someone had to make it a referent for some term, it should have been for lahu. That is, all types are included under lahu. This is something I will mention as we proceed, which God has described as things of adornment, whether they relate to clothes, cities, houses, acoustics, speech. None of these are prohibited. We'll discuss this later. However, the point I'm making now is that we should understand the foundation of it. That is, neither God nor the Messenger of God has anywhere directly pronounced it as prohibited, and neither do the principles laid down for deeming something prohibited apply to it. Thus, under all circumstances, its usage only will be discussed, and that can be good or bad.
Ghamidi Sahab, it's clear that in your view, there's no directive stating it's prohibited and it's about the usage of things. You also provided some new examples. There too is much to ponder and reflect upon. Now I will address directly the verses about which it is claimed that from these verses of the Quran, the fundamental argument against the prohibition of music is made. And the companions and exegetes have used these as their basis. There are 4 verses, and I will present them to you in the sequence in which these verses have been presented in the books for the prohibition of music. The first verse among these is, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. If some of them buys lahu al-hadith so that he misleads people towards ignorance and away from the path of God. This is verse 6 of Surah Luqman. Pick any book on the topic of music prohibition. The first thing it discusses is this verse, and it claims that the term lahu al-hadith refers to singing and music. How do you view this verse?
First, let's consider the construction used here. What does it mean according to Arabic grammar? Lahu al-hadith is in the accusative. If you expand lahu al-hadith, then it becomes lahwun min al-hadith. That is, lahwun things, discussions. Such discussions don't need further clarification. The term hadith is used here in the sense of discussions. Now consider the word lahwan. In Arabic, lahwun is not an uncommon or rare word. This word is frequently used in the Arabic language. And if you consult any lexicon, you will find its meaning. In no lexicon of the Arabic language will you find it defined as singing or music.
Okay, so that's not the meaning of the word.
What is the meaning of the word? The meaning of the word is ma yanhu bi al-insan, ma yutanazahu bihi al-insan. That is, lahwun is used for things in which a human being gets involved, things from which humans derive pleasure. That is, forms of entertainment, things that attract human beings towards them.
Ghamidi Sahab, the comment made by Tabari here, where he says, in all the gatherings where polytheism takes place, he has directly mentioned singing without any condition or limitation. So, can its meaning be taken that according to him, singing...
When we attend a mushaira, we enjoy each couplet recited there. We applaud and temporarily lose ourselves in that wondrous atmosphere. So, what types of entertainment are there? That is, if we are playing cricket, it is also lahwun. When we play hockey, that too is lahwun. When we sit at home playing Ludo, that is lahwun as well. When we play karam, that is lahwun too. Just as I pointed out earlier, there can be many things in sports, all of which are termed lahwun in the Arabic language. That is the same thing, ma yalhu bihil insanu ma yatanazzahu bihil insan. This is the actual meaning of this word. Lexicographers would describe it this way. Now, concerning things of lahu, the question arises, can we find any evidence for its meaning in the text of the Quran as well? So, pick up the Quran and see where this word has been used. Earlier, if you recall, we had a similar discussion for the word tawaffa, and I mentioned that first, we should understand the lexical meaning of the word. Then, see in what context this word is used in the Quran, the book of God. So this word, that is lahwun, if you research, it appears in 10 places in the Quran. I am presenting to you the translation of Shah Abdul Qadir for all those 10 places. And you will see that nowhere, not in a single place, has he translated this word as music. When you encounter a word in the Quran and claim that this is what it means, something must support it. For example, I see you and say, brother, what law have you got yourself into? And at that moment, you are playing chess.
We could be involved in anything?
No, I am saying you are playing chess. So clearly, I have used this word in the context of playing chess. I see you sitting and playing karam. So I say to you, what lahu are you occupied with?
Its application has been on karam?
Clearly, its application is on karam. That is, the word itself doesn't specify that it is only for singing, or when used it implies music, or this word is specifically for music or singing. There's nothing like that. So I said that it's been used in 10 places. And the translation I am presenting is chosen because, although it is an old translation, it is one of the earliest translations of the Quran. However, everyone refers to it in the Urdu language. No one can claim that this translation is incorrect or that it represents a particular group or sect? You know the status of Shah Sahab. Look, in Surah An'am, the verse وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَعِبٌ وَلَهُ. What is the translation? And the worldly life is nothing but play and amusement.
Okay, and what is the translation done by him for lahwan?
The translation for laib is play, and lahwun is translated as amusement. I just explained what the lexical meaning of lahwun is. مَا يَلْهُ بِهِ الْإِنسَانُ مَا يَتَنَزَّهُ بِهِ الْإِنسَانُ. That is, that which charms a person, that which fascinates a person, in which one becomes preoccupied, which completely engrosses one. All such things will be termed lahwun. Now, you see, he has stated it from both aspects, and the worldly life is nothing but play and amusement. Next, in Surah Ankabut, the verse is, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ. And this world's life is nothing but recreation and play. Amusement can stem from anything. When you ask me, I say, I'm reading a novel just for amusement. I'm sitting with these kids just for amusement. I'm chatting with friends just for amusement.
I'm out for a stroll?
Or on an outing for amusement. Thus, it's a comprehensive term for any such activity where we entertain ourselves or derive pleasure, which is done for the sake of amusing oneself. The general term often used to express these is fun and amusement. So this was their translation. Let's move on. Next is Surah Muhammad. The words are, إِنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا لَعِبٌ وَلَهُونَ. The worldly life is play and amusement. Here he has translated la'ib as play and lahun as amusement.
That is, life and the world have been described as laib and lahun.
This comment is about worldly life. Next is Surah Hadid. اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو. Know that the life of this world is only play and amusement. Next is the last verse of Surah Jumma, which I referenced earlier. وَإِذَا رَأَوْا تِجَارَةً أَوْ لَهْوًا. And when they see some merchandise or some amusement, that is, he has translated tijarat as some merchandise and lahu as or some amusement. Again, in Surah An'am, the words are وَذَرِ الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا دِينَهُمْ لَعِبًا وَلَهْوًا وَغَرَّتْهُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. And leave those who take their religion as play and amusement. The same translation, that is, play for la'ib and amusement for lahwun. وَغَرَّتْهُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. And whom the worldly life has deceived. Next is Surah Anbiya. The words are لَوْ أَرَدْنَا أَن نَتَّخِذَ لَهْوًا لَاتَّخَذْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا. Had it been our will to find a diversion, we could have found one from us. Here the translation done for lahwun is diversion. The meaning of the verse is that regarding God, people are pondering what this world is. Is it God's theater? That is, what is happening here? It's just fun and a pastime. So God states that if I had intended to make it an arena for fun and pastime, I could have easily done it for myself. Why would there be a need to do all this? This was the response from God. So the translation done was diversion. Next is Surah Araf. The same topic is there as well. الَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا دِينَهُمْ لَهْوًا وَلَعِبًا وَغَرَّتْهُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. People who made their religion a source of diversion and play. Since lahwun has come earlier here, so the translation done by him is diversion and play, and whom the worldly life deceived. Now come to Surah Jumma. In Surah Jumma, this word has been used above also, and it is mentioned below as well. I read earlier the translation of the text above. Now listen to that mentioned below. قُلْ مَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهْوِ وَمِنَ التِّجَارَةِ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. Say, that which God has is better than any amusement or merchandise. His translation for tijarat is merchandise, like we say we are going to make purchases. And the translation of lahwun is amusement. These are the 10 places which I pointed to you. Please note in them, this word has been used in 2 aspects. The whole life of the world has been described as lahu or la'ab. So can you translate it? The worldly life is nothing but music. The worldly life is nothing but singing. That is, or you will translate as Shah Sahab has done, the worldly life is nothing but amusement and fun. What is the sense in which this term was used here? It is used in the sense that in this worldly life we have pleasure and comfort. It gives respite. and in it, the person gets so involved and consumed and thus forgets about the afterlife. This word has been used in this context. In multiple places, the Qur'an has used it. Now you tell me, if such be the methodology for proving prohibitions, then it can be proved from these verses that the whole worldly life is haram.
Yes, an important point.
Then what is the point in living, as the Qur'an is telling about the whole worldly life in these verses, and it has been repeated in 6 places, that is out of the 10 places, in 6 places it is stating about the whole life that, what is it? It is just amusement and play. Now, the aspect in which it states this, I have referred to it. That is it too is an aspect where attention is being drawn towards a specific thing. However, if you say that in this way, the prohibition is established
by the occurrence of the word lahwun.
By the occurrence of the word lahwun. Then the prohibition is established. Then our lives, our waking, our sitting down, our work, to have pleasure in the worldly life, to struggle and to the extent of even doing ibadah in the worldly life gets included in lahu olab. When something is stated, then we should note its context, the occasion, the circumstances in which the discussion has been taking place, and to insist that this word is used in the context of singing and music. That is, I said to you that a word is implying games and amusements. Obviously, its usage will vary from sometimes being used for some game, sometimes for some other occupation, sometimes for some recreational activity, sometimes for some acts of amusements. It will be on different occasions. However, if you say that the word is specific for something, then how will you go about proving it? Then you see the second aspect of its usage in the 4 verses. What has the Quran done there? There it has been told that religion is a serious business. Religion is about thinking and contemplations. Religion is the aim of life. These people have made their religion play and amusement. They have made it a subject for recreation. So, what is being stated here? That religion is not a topic of amusement. The religion is not a topic for recreation. Religion is not such a thing from which you derive entertainment and pleasure of contemplation by doing some discussion on it. Religion is a serious reality. It should be dealt with in this capacity and seriousness. Here also you see that we cannot translate it as music in any case. Will we say that these people have turned religion into singing? These people have turned religion into music? And can we say on this occasion that since religion has been turned into this, hence it has become prohibited?
Otherwise it wasn't prohibited, which Shah Sahab has done, right?
When this has been turned into religion, so obviously its ill use is taking place on that occasion. The same point which I said at the beginning, that we at times make ill use of a certain permitted and allowed thing. I had given its examples. So here, what he has done, that is the activities of amusement and recreation, all of which in themselves were not unlawful. However, they turned the complete religion into it, so it is like bringing something in a wrong context. When you brought it to that position, then God says, see, what are you doing? Religion is not such a thing which you can treat as a play or amusement. So clearly, the goal here is not merely to declare lahwun as forbidden. With this explanation, it should be entirely clear that neither the lexical meaning of this word is singing or music, nor is it used in this context or in this manner. Not in any place, that is, across all the 10 instances I have presented to you. Now, considering this, you see that these activities are regarded as amusement and sport, and if you reflect, there are numerous such activities about which we never suspect them to be prohibited. I just gave some examples. We're having a casual chat, we sit with friends and talk, and everyone there enjoys the conversation. It often happens when we watch a football or a hockey match, or when we play hockey or football or cricket. There are many games that we play. No one ever thinks that all these are prohibited activities. Yet, there are various sports about which there is no doubt that they are completely illegal or unlawful, or you might say that these are unnecessary, or you might say these are immoral activities. For instance, gambling is also considered a game. So you express disapproval, saying this person gambles. So actually playing is not prohibited. It's this particular activity that's wrong. So lahwun may apply to improper activities as it often does to a proper activity. But the notion that wherever this word appears, it signifies singing or music, this is never the case. I am currently not discussing the verse and its implied meaning there. I've just told you that neither according to the dictionary does this meaning apply, nor has God specified any meaning from its usage in the Qur'an that wherever it is used, it must mean singing and music. And since the context is one of disapproval, we will issue a fatwa for its prohibition. Now, let us turn to the knowledge tradition of the Muslims. Obviously, it is the Qur'an, the verses of the Qur'an. A word has been used in the Qur'an, we shall refer to that verse. And we will see how our scholarship interprets the word lahwun. Is it so that the commentators have, especially in the verse of Surah Luqman, agreed that, okay, the word does not mean singing, but here it has been specifically used for singing, just for singing? Is this the case? So, we will examine here in sequence how our tradition views it. That is, how has our scholarship viewed it? I have previously drawn your attention that if we have to choose, then from the traditional perspective, we should first opt for the commentary of Tabari. Every scholar would do the same. I have also given the reason, that is, when after the Prophet, peace be upon him, the era of the interpretation and exegesis of the Qur'an began, it wasn't that initially people wrote down some tafsirs. A long period of about 100 to 150 years passed, where there wasn't the practice of systematically writing exegesis. However, people were not just reading the Qur'an, they were teaching it too. Some renowned companions used to give explanations of the Qur'an. The followers of the companions used to teach, and we know their names. That is, the specialized scholars of the Qur'an, or those who were teachers of the Qur'an, or those who served in teaching and instruction of the Qur'an. So they would, with regard to a word, sometimes with respect to its meaning, and sometimes based on evidences, and sometimes with respect to the occasion on which the verse was revealed, accordingly they would interpret. All these interpretations got transmitted in the form of narrations. That is, it wasn't that the commentaries were compiled in written form, rather these became narrations that people passed on. So, the first and most comprehensive compilation of these narrations was done by Tabari, which is known as the Tafsir of Tabari. Tabari's methodology was to report all the narrations, and generally at the end, he presents a summary of his findings. So I am presenting this to you. He has mentioned all those points. That is, under the verse of Surah Luqman, he will indicate that someone has interpreted it as referring to singing or to some other thing. Whatever views existed before him, he has narrated each one of them. After presenting them at the end, he asks, can this be specifically about singing? Isn't this your question? When God has used the term lahw al-hadith, here it implies singing and music. I am saying that the definition of the word does not imply this. And now the discussion about its referent has started. So he states that there is no reason with regard to its referent to attribute it specifically to singing. Now, listen to his commentary on it. He has compiled all the narrations, that is, you might say that a systematic tafsir of the Muslims reaches us in this form. He says that وَالصَّوَابُ مِنَ الْقَوْلِ فِي ذَلِكَ أَنْ يُقَالَ. That is, I have quoted all of it previously. Now, if we want to understand the correct view, it can be said, that is, he is summarizing the correct opinion. He says, أُنِيَ بِهِ كُلُّ مَا كَانَ مِنَ الْحَدِيثِ مُلْهِيًا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. That is, what is meant by it here? He states, it means all those things, all those activities which make people become unmindful of the path of God. مِمَّا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْ اسْتِمَاعِهِ أَوْ رَسُولُهُ. That is, all those things should be considered, among it those which have been prohibited from being heard by God or by His Messenger. بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى عَنَى بِقَوْلِهِ لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ. Because God has not mentioned anything specific and has spoken the term lahw al-hadith generally. He is explaining the same and further says, وَلَمْ يُخَصِّصْ بَعْضًا دُونَ بَعْضٍ. and there is no evidence here that something specific has been stated, there could be 15,000 things where the term lahwun could apply, and God hasn't specified anyone. Then he says, فَذَلِكَ عَلَى عُمُومِ. Thus, the term is in its general connotation. General connotation implies all the activities for sports and amusement in general can be implied with it. And he says that it will remain حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ مَا يَدُلُّ عَلَى خُصُوصِهِ, until some justification appears, and it explicitly tells us that no, here it has been specifically used for a particular thing, like, for example, you may say that it has been used for singing or for music. This is the review by Ibn Jarir Tabri of all the narrations. With it, you may guess that even the most renowned and esteemed of the exegetes are not ready to accept the point. The verse which you have read from Surah Luqman at no level implies singing or aims at it, or is it specifically referred to? We have to prove the prohibition, then it is necessary to state that this is what is meant. So he is saying that the sentence used here can refer to innumerable things, and he has just pointed at the worst of all things that are possible. Now you see, Zamakhshari, when we move forward from the narration-based exegesis, then the renowned scholars who have written great works with respect to the systematic exposition of the language of the Qur'an. Among them, we know that Zamakhshari holds a special place, and the rest of the scholars rely on his expositions. So, what has he written about the verse of Lahu al-Hadith from Surah Luqman? He says, Allahu kullu batilin alha anil khayri wa amma ya'ni. That is, lahu, essentially what I have said, that it holds for all things related to amusements. However, if it is used in a bad sense, then it will apply to all those vices which make a person unmindful of any act of virtue. The things which are worthy of attention, those things which a serious person must care for, from those things the attention is diverted by making one busy in any alternate activity. This word can be used for all such things. He is giving examples of vicious activities. So he goes on to enumerate those further by citing examples. What are those things? He says that Lahu al-Hadith, which has been used here, what all things can be included here in it. نحو سماع الأساطير والأحاديث التي لا أصل لها. So you understand it in this way? Like many people sit in the night, recount tales, stories of jinn, and different stories and such things, which do not have any basis. Those will also come under lahwun. وَتَحَدُّثٌ بِالْخُرَافَاتِ وَمَزَاحِكَ وَفُضُولِ الْكَلَامِ. Like when we talk, we relate a lot of rubbish to each other. In the same way, there are a lot of jokes that are shared. In the same way, trifling, in which idle talks take place. He says that it applies to all of these. After this, enumerating all these, he says, one may include lahu al-ghina'i wa ta'allum al-musikar. In it is included singing and those who teach the art of music as well. That is, all these things may be applied to it. However, the word lahwun being specifically used just for singing or just for music, he too is not ready to accept it. So I told you that a leading master of the language and rhetoric is also saying the same. The largest corpus of narrative-based exegesis that we possess by Tabri, he also has pointed to a similar explanation. Now move on to our times. Our renowned scholar, Maulana Sayyid Abul Sahib Maududi, note what has he written. The same verse which you read, the same verse of Surah Luqman, he writes, the original words are, first of all, coming to the word, the original words are lahu al-hadith, that is such a thing that engrosses a person in itself and makes him heedless of all other things. That is, this is the actual meaning of lahwun. Listen to it again. That is such a thing that engrosses a person in itself and makes him heedless of all other things. I had said the same, that when the experts of language will explain this word, then what do they say? مَا يَلْهُ بِهِ الْإِنسَانُ مَا يَتَنَزَّهُ بِهِ الْإِنسَانُ. Things for recreation, one that engrosses a person gets enamored with it, where a person gets charmed by something. So here, Maulana Sayyid Abul Sahab Maududi has stated the same meaning. After this he says, as per the lexicon, these words do not possess any aspect of reproach. That is, if we see according to the lexicon, then in the words of Lahu al-Hadith, there isn't any such thing that can be termed as a vice. There is no aspect of reproach. However, usually its usage is applicable to evil, unnecessary and immoral things. That is generally when we use it. Obviously, there is some comparison being drawn between things. So bad, unnecessary and frivolous activities are also termed as lahwun. Now he gives examples of it. For example, gossip, idle talk, cracking jokes, tales, fiction, novels, singing, music, and similar things. It became clear in this matter that the complete knowledge and understanding of the Muslims is not ready to merely accept the specific meaning of singing. That is, all those things are included in lawal hadith, which infatuates, charms, and if at all the vices are to be listed, then there can be 10 such things. Now you see just for a while that the narrations that have been stated, as you know among us, when the exegesis of Qur'an is done, there is one aspect of it where we explain the meaning of a word, then the construction of the sentence, and then the context and the backdrop of it. Among us generally, the people quote those narrations and the tales which, according to their thinking, had occurred sometimes in the backdrop of those verses. So Maulana Sayyid Abul ala Sahib Maududi has commented on it. He says that Ibn Hisham has quoted the narration of Muhammad bin Ishaq that when the call of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was spreading in spite of the ill efforts of the disbelievers of Mecca, then Nazar bin Haris said to the people of the Quraysh that the person with whom you are up against, just this will not suffice. Listen to it again. When the call of Prophet, peace be upon him, was spreading in spite of the ill efforts of the disbelievers of Mecca, then Nazar bin Haris said to the people of the Quraysh that the person with whom you are up against, just this will not suffice. This person has grown up right from childhood till date. He has been the best person morally among you. He was the truest and most trustworthy among you. Now, you call him a soothsayer, a sorcerer, a poet, or a madman. So who will be able to prove these points? Are people unaware of the ways which the conjurers employ? Are people unaware of the ways the soothsayers talk? Are people unfamiliar with poetry? Or do the people not know the condition of a person who is struck with madness? Which of the allegations among all can be affixed to Muhammad, peace be upon him, so that you may make the people believe in them and stop them from paying attention towards him? Wait, I have a remedy for it. So he is narrating this incident. Wait, I have a remedy for it. Who said this? Nazar bin Haris. To whom did he say this? To the chieftains of the Quraysh. After that he went to Iraq from Mecca and brought from there the stories of the kings of Persia and the tales of Rustam and Isfandiar, and started gatherings for the telling of tales, so that people are distracted from the Qur'an and they get immersed in these tales. This is the narration about the occasion of revelation and its backdrop. Now listen further to it. It is said that the same narration has been quoted by Wahidi in Asbab un-Nazul as reported by Qalbi and Muqatil. And Ibn Abbas has added further on it that for this purpose Nazar had, along with these for this purpose, he also bought the singing slave girls. When he heard about anyone being impressed by Prophet, peace be upon him, he would send one of his slave girls and instructed her to indulge him so much in merrymaking and song, so that he gets preoccupied with you and becomes heedless towards Islam.
Okay, the point is clear.
What is left to understand after this, that is the summary till now, is neither according to the lexicon the word means this, nor among our exegetes has anyone opined in this way. Rather, you are seeing that the full corpus of the knowledge of exegesis is referring to many things as being meant by it. And the incident that is being stated in its backdrop, on which presently I am not commenting at, that is what is the context of the verse and how does it relate to the incident. Leave all of it aside. The way our exegetes are stating it, there was not just the singing and music, the tales of Rustum and Isfandiar were also there. So after this, the point gets clear. Now after it, come to the verse which you had read. I will read its translation, just listen to it and see what is the actual meaning of the verse and in the context in which it had come. Had you read the verse of Surah Luqman?
Yes.
We will read this verse in its context. It is in the beginning of the surah. Alif Lam Mim Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim. هدى ورحمة للمحسنين الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم بالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون ومن الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث. Is this what you read? ومن الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم ويتخذها هزوا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين. Now listen to the translation. This is Surah Alif Lam Mim. These are the verses of the wise book, a guide and a mercy for the doers of good, those who perform salah and give zakah, and they have faith in the hereafter. Such are on guidance from their Lord, and such are the successful. Among them are people who purchase frivolous talk to mislead men from the path of God without knowledge, and take it in mockery. For such there will be a humiliating punishment. Now I have explained its background. Listen further. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا وَلَّى مُسْتَكْبِرًا كَأَنَّهُ لَمْ يَسْمَعْهَا كَأَنَّ فِي أُذُنَيْهِ وَقْرًا فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. And when our verses are recited to one of them, he turns away arrogantly, as if he did not hear them, as if there were deafness in his ears. Give him tidings of a painful punishment. This is the context of the verse you read. What has happened here? Here it has occurred that on one side is the call of the messenger of God, on one side is his message, on one side he is inviting to the path of God, and on the other side, opposing that, something is being presented to distract people from God and turn their attention toward it. Now let's assume for a moment that it was music, or assume that it is singing, or accept that by bringing the slave girls he had organized the parties. Is he being condemned because that activity is inherently wrong? He is condemned because it has been used in opposition to the messenger of God.
Absolutely right.
It is opposing that call. The Quran here says that these are the people who are steeped in arrogance. They have closed their ears. They are not ready to listen to anything. And they have become buyers of triviality. They prefer those things, and against whom? Against the call of the messenger of God. And why do they prefer it? So that they may distract people from the path of God. If a person with this objective organizes a cricket match so that he distracts people from the call of the religion. If he organizes a gathering for idle chat, just imagine that the call of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is spreading, as Maulana Syed Abul Sahib Maududi has written about the incident. And there the discussion is ongoing on how to make sure that this call is rendered ineffective. And some person says that I will, as an alternative to it, make a theater in Mecca. In such a case, this making of the theater would become one of the most reprehensible of crimes. This is the same point which I mentioned, that it is the improper use of something based on which it can be condemned. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, was called a poet, then the Quran commented on what poets are like. And when in opposition to the call of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Lawal Hadith was propped up, that is, what all stood against it, these games and amusements, whether those be the tales of Rustam and Isfandiar, or be any gossip gatherings, or be they the singing of the slave girls, whatever it is, when it stands opposing the messenger of God, then it should likewise be commented upon. So, what is there relating to prohibition that you stated?
Ghamidi Sahab, the instances of this word's occurrences in the Quran, the ancient commentaries in the form of narrations, and the opinions of the commentators, you presented all this, and this is surely paving a clear path for the listeners that it is the usage of things which actually turn them towards this. However, I will ask you that we started with the translation of Shah Abdul Qadir, that where and in what sense has he stated the meaning of the word lahwun in the Quran. So now at the end you tell me that for the verse 6 itself of Surah Luqman, what does Shah Sahab say about its translation?
He too has done the same translation. In every place he is making the same translation. Like I told you of the 10 places, listen to this as well. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. And among the people is he who buys idle talk. So the translation he has done is idle talk. Anyone who is aware of the Arabic language would never translate this as singing and music. That is, never would he do it. Its translation is the same which I have told you, the topic is the same. And here, what is the reason for it being mentioned? Here it has come up in discussion for comparison. It should always be understood what is the situation and the context in which a statement is made, and in what aspect has it been said. That aspect renders it worthy of condemnation. However, solely on its basis, claiming that it has been prohibited, had this been true, then Shah Sahab would have used the same words in his translation. Then after that, he would have explained that here actually it's prohibition been stated by God. No scholar has made even this argument here.
The point is absolutely clear. We are moving towards the close. The last question for today's session. After all this, when a person presents the opinion that this is the verse of the Qur'an, and Ibn Abbas and Abdullah bin Masud and Sa'id bin Jubair and Mujahid and Qatada and Ikrima have construed this as music, then after all this, the point is also fully clear that if their opinion or this attribution is correct, then too, the point will be viewed in the backdrop that it could also imply music if its usage is wrong.
I have told you the backdrop which has been narrated by Sayyid Abul ala Maududi. That is, those narrations are a part of our books, that some incidents of this nature are narrated in the backdrop of these verses. So you noted there that the singing of the slave girls has also been mentioned. If on its basis, somebody says that here its referent was singing also, it is absolutely okay. What is the harm in it? However, in which aspect was it said? Does this verse pronounce its prohibition? It states that whatever it is, I am telling you that you may translate lahwal hadith as music. Go ahead. So what would you do after translating it like this? That is, what would be the meaning of it? The meaning would be that there are some people among them who are organizing music parties so that they distract people from the path of God. Do it, make that the translation, and see. Keep singing as the translation. Whatever translation you think is correct, do it, but the condemnation that has been stated there, that is not according to the object or thing, rather the usage of it and the context of it. And I have said to you that in such a situation, even if you organize a hockey match so that people are distracted from the call of the messenger, then what doubt will there be about it being prohibited?
This first verse for prohibition music, the verse 6 of Surah Luqman, generally the argument is made using it. We learned in great detail and from all aspects. There are some more questions on this. Inshallah, we will present them to you in the future. And which are the 3 remaining verses, and then a full compilation of hadith which are presented in this reference. We shall present each one of them to you. Thank you for your time till now.
Thank you very much.